Hello, and welcome to another exciting edition of the Web of Conspiracy. I am your host, Adam Webb. It is great to be back with you here after a couple weeks not doing the show. Well, 1 week not doing the show. Um, it's just great to be back. Little update on the show and what's going on. I missed last week because I had a third surgery to completely remove the rest of the melanoma that was found a few months back. Um, Fortunately, at least in the preliminary results, two of the three sites have come back completely clear. So very good news there, very promising. The third site, they're still showing abnormal cells, not necessarily malignant yet, but it's hard to tell at this point. So still awaiting final pathologies, but getting closer, getting much closer to being at least done with this. So I appreciate all the support that I've received from the listeners over the past few months, both on this show and then on my previous show. It's great to have that kind of support, and I just want to thank everybody for that. Um, at this time, fortunately, it seems at the moment I shouldn't have any interruptions for the show for at least a little while. That's my hope. Be able to finish out and not miss any other weeks here for a little bit. Um, so a few things I guess I wanted to talk about before I got into the main topic for today's show, which, by the way, is the Georgia Guidestones. So some of you have heard of that, I'm sure. Have heard of this monument. Others probably haven't. It's just more or less more recently becoming a little more well known. I know there was a show on the History Channel that talked about it. There were some other things as well. So I'm going to briefly discuss the Georgia Guidestones with everybody today. But before I get into that, there was a few things that kind of caught my attention and I wanted to talk about before going too much further. Um, First off, for those of my listeners in the States, happy Black Friday. Hopefully you enjoyed your Thanksgiving Day, had a chance to reflect, and uh, I guess I wanted to kind of go into a little bit of a tirade on Friday, so to speak. Um, while I do consider myself primarily a capitalist, I don't consider myself a commercialist. And I guess when I say something like that, I mean that I don't know that I'm certainly not thrilled about the idea that all these stores were opening Thanksgiving morning. Um, it's not fair to those employees. And I, having worked on holidays in the past, I know just how difficult that can be. So I have to tell you that it's very disheartening to see now that we've come to the point where shopping for Christmas for material goods has completely leapfrogged Thanksgiving as a holiday in the eyes of these businesses. And while I understand they seize the opportunity to make a buck when they can, I think at some point the line has to be drawn. Um, my I'm not opposed to the idea of the midnight shop opening Thanksgiving night. I could live with that, but I think that when we get to the point where we're talking about being open all day on Thanksgiving, being open at 6 a.m. Thanksgiving morning, um, the whole idea is to reflect upon uh, what we should be thankful for, what we have to be thankful for. And then on that same day, and then hours later, we're out basically behaving like animals in pursuit of material goods. Very disheartening, um, very frustrating. And you hear all the reports of the violence, the fights, the injuries that go on during this kind of event. It's very disheartening. Um, so I don't want to spend the entire show complaining and moaning and groaning about it, but I do think that we need to really reconsider our priorities a little bit. And while I'm not opposed to businesses trying to make a buck, I get it. That's what you're there for. But I do think that there has to be a certain degree of limitations established. And I think businesses, and the only way that that's going to happen is if we, the people, decline to take part in this kind of circus. If we abstain from going out and doing the Black Thursday shopping at this point, the Thanksgiving Day shopping, um, that's the only way that we'll be able to take any of this back, so to speak. So, um, very disheartening, and unfortunately now this has been happening for a few years with the violence and whatnot, but to see now how early this is starting and Christmas is really encroaching on Thanksgiving, and I personally am not a supporter of that. It's Christmas, the holiday season, all that's just jumping right over Thanksgiving, and that's not exactly how, at least I believe it should be. So, okay. So for those of you who follow the show on Facebook and Twitter, um, I posted a link yesterday evening that I thought was really incredible. I don't think it's gotten a whole lot of traction yet on here, but perhaps you'll have a chance to after the show here to go check it out. Scientists researching Lowe's, a musical composer, he put together this recorded these sounds of crickets and then slowed them down. The idea behind it was to um, recreate a cricket sound slowed down to see what it would sound like. And the idea was to take it, and because the crickets live such a short life, to stretch it out over a span of what would be equivalent to a human's lifetime. And by doing so, it slows down the chirping tremendously. Um, but listening to the sound, he made a recording first with two different layers. There's one layer of just crickets chirping, and it sounds just like regular crickets chirping. But underneath, it sounds as if though it's Christmas carolers or somebody or a group of people humming very melodically. It's very beautiful. He likened it to the sounds of angels singing. I've heard that often described as that. Um, but it's really compelling. And I know that you're probably asking, well, this is a little bit conspiracy. Why are you doing anything about crickets singing like that, and what's this have to do with your show? Well, the point I'm trying to make and what I discuss on the show is I tend to talk about a lot of things that are out there. I talk about cryptids, I talk about Sasquatch, things that people don't believe exist. And the reason that I bring something like this up is that no one would have dreamed that crickets make that kind of sound before, slowed down, that they would even sound like that. It's very unusual. It's very compelling to hear. And the point that I'm trying to make in this is that there is so much that we do not understand and do not know about the world that we live in. There's so much we just don't have a true grasp of. Either we're stuck to ideas that are old and outdated, or we're just so closed-minded that we're not willing to think about things in a different way. But there's a number of different reasons why, uh, as humans, we choose to view the world the way we do. Not all of them are bad reasons. However, I do think it's important that from time to time we take a look at the world around us and truly try to appreciate what is there. And the fact is most of us have heard crickets, almost every night in the summer. And some enjoy the sound, others don't. Others find it annoying, especially when you have that one lone cricket in your house and it's driving you crazy. But when you hear the grouping of them together slow down, it is quite beautiful and truly surprised me and impressed me. So the point that I wanted to highlight in all this is to look for the things that are there that we don't realize that are there, right? And that's what I've been trying to do with this show. So I thought that this was a great example of finding something that's there that we didn't know was. So, okay, now moving forward into today's main topic. Um, this is a topic that has become fairly controversial for a number of different people. There are some people who are really open to the idea of what these Georgia Guidestones talk about. There are others who are very concerned, very worried that perhaps there's um, something else, something evil behind these Guidestones. So, to give you a little bit of an overview, the Georgia Guidestones are a granite monument built it was erected in March 22nd, 1980, in Elberton County, Georgia. And this monument, it's a granite monument, and it's sort of been described as the Stonehenge of the Americas, or it's these giant granite slabs that have been erected with a piece in the middle, centerpiece in the middle, very tall. Um, I believe the dimensions are roughly, I think, in height about 19 feet high. So they're very tall. And so obviously it's something that stands out. It's not something that's easily missed. Now, these guide stones were erected by an unknown person or persons Um, the person who basically describes themselves as being um, the person responsible for the content calls themselves RC Christian, which is believed to be a pseudonym. And at the same time, this author states that it was a small group of Americans who seek the age of reason. These are the individuals responsible for the creation, development, and the erection of these guidestones. Now, they did this through commissioning um, a private contractor, the Elberton Granite Finishing Company, to build it, but they commissioned it anonymously. Now, these guidestones, as I said, they're very tall, very heavy, very big structure. On these stones, written in 8 different languages, we have what some describe as a New Age 10 Commandments, so to speak. But it's a little different in respect to that it's really a guiding of a civilization. Now, many of these different things, these items, these 10 guidelines, they're not all that objectionable. That most people would look at these things and be like, okay, nothing wrong with that. Um, so I'll go through the list with you, and then I'll highlight a few that I think that have been criticized by those who are concerned about what these stones really are calling for, and we'll go from there. The first inscription. Now, these inscriptions, keep in mind, across this monument are written in 8 different languages: English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. 8 different languages, one on each side of the 4 slabs. Now, the first 2 are probably 2 of the more controversial. The first guidestone claims that we are to maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. The second inscription states to guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. The third is unite humanity with a living new language. The fourth is to rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. The fifth is to protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. The sixth is let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. The seventh is to avoid petty laws and useless officials. The eighth is to balance personal rights with social duties. The ninth is to prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. And the 10th this is somewhat unusual in that it says, be not a cancer on the earth, leave room for nature, leave room for nature. It repeats to leave room for nature twice. So, when looking at what is stated on these guidestones, I think most people would be okay with the idea of not being a cancer on the earth. Even those who aren't necessarily the most stringent environmentalists could see the benefit in this. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Those who believe in some sort of greater power, which many do, would not see an issue with this either. And perhaps, whatever their definition of the greater power, still wouldn't see an issue with this. Balance personal rights with social duties. Once again, that's another idea that I don't think is all that bad either. 7, avoid petty laws and useless officials. I think most people would agree with that. The 6th is where we get a little bit of controversy from some people. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Now, that's where some people get a little caught up in the idea of, well, this sounds a little New World Order-ish to me. This sounds like a one world government and whatnot. Well, and maybe there's something to that. However, I have to admit that I don't think that there's anything wrong with the idea of letting nations rule internally as much as possible. Maybe with the exception of, human rights violations and that sort of thing. But otherwise, I don't know that there would really be a total issue with that. However, some people look at that in disputes in a world court and become immediately concerned that perhaps there's something here. The 5th is protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. I think most people would agree with that as well. The 4th, rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. And I don't think that's all that objectionable either. The third is sort of somewhat related to the sixth: unite humanity with a living new language. So for those who are concerned and fearful of a new world order, you have talk of a world court, you know, talk of like almost a governing body over the world, and then, oh, what do you know? One language that we're all supposed to speak. So that becomes a somewhat alarmist as well. The other two takes on an Orwellian sort of tone. Number two, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. And number one, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. So these first two guides are essentially calling for what would appear to be the deaths of about 7.5 billion people on the planet, and that we are supposed to be very careful with about who reproduces and how they reproduce and who they reproduce with who, and we need to have a more fit people and a more diverse people. While I don't disagree with the idea of having a fit and diverse group of people to make us stronger and to eliminate some of the potential genetic issues and genetic diseases that are out there, I think that we talk about looking at these two commands, so to speak, and then we're talking about infringing on some personal liberties, which, going back to balancing personal rights with social duties, obviously for whoever wrote this sees that the social duty in this respect outweighs the rights to have how we get to reproduce and who gets to reproduce. So for those who see this and they become immediately alarmed that perhaps there is in a less than benign calling in what these guidestones ask for, while most of this I think many people would agree with being acceptable, if not preferable, when you read those first two, becomes extremely alarming. Whoever this is believes that we should not reproduce at the rate that we have. And certainly there seems to be some evidence that, yes, there is an extent of overpopulation, and the fact that we're now trying to genetically, modify our crops to be able to support this type of reproduction, there becomes more concern. So maybe there is a hint of okay, this is preferable perhaps, but should this really be the way? I don't know. And certainly this is the mystery behind what is on these guidestones. However, there are some other features about these guidestones that are rather unique. Okay, there are some astronomical features about these guidestones. The channel through the center stone more or less acts like a celestial pole. There's a horizontal slot that indicates the annual travel of the sun. And then the sunbeam through the capstone, marks noontime throughout the year. So when that sunbeam comes through, that tells you it's noon throughout the year, which I thought was rather interesting. The stones also go into great detail describing the exact physical data of the stones, how much each weighed, the specific height, how much support stones were, very, very detailed, how much granite was used, where the granite was quarried from. All of this was very specific in a tablet that just basically explained the physical data of the stones as well. So there's a tremendous amount of mystery behind these stones. What exactly are they calling for? Is this a good thing? Are they calling for good things? Is this a bad thing? Is this part of the New World Order, as I mentioned earlier? There's a number of controversies that have sprung out of the Georgia Guidestones. Now, there are those who argue that this RC Christian is part of some sort of a satanic group that is looking to destroy the world and create this new world order. And it's just all about sun worshiping, and there are those who look at it and become very threatened by the idea of what these guidestones represent in their mind, that they believe that this is something very evil. There's also those such as Alex Jones, who has his own radio show on terrestrial radio, who um, basically put out there that in this respect, this seems to be one of the more common theories about who these people perhaps may be. He believes that this is a secret society known as the Rosicrucians. The Rosicrucians were, for I try to give a best way to describe what the Rosicrucians were and are, is that they're more or less a sect of Christian mystics who left the Catholic Church and sought to have a more a philosophical, a more science-based, and try to move beyond some of the stagnant dogma in what they believed the church was. At the time that it split away during the Reformation period in the early 1600s, uh, it was often very closely associated to Protestantism and Lutheranism. However, it sort of went into a different respect. There were a number of different manifestos, and that is believed that the person who was responsible for the creation of these Christian mystics, this sect, that this individual's name was Christian Rosenkreutz. Okay. Um, Now, Rosenkreutz, of course, when you look at this name, Christian Rosenkreutz, and then you see the pseudonym given on the Guidestones, R.C. Christian, this is where the R.C. representing Rosicrucian and then Christian. So that's where a lot of the idea of the steam, picking up the steam, that perhaps this is the secret society of the Rosicrucians who are responsible for the creation of these Guidestones, and that they're the ones that are calling for this global religion and world court and to lower the populations and all those things that people are really concerned that perhaps there's something very diabolical here. Um, on the other hand, there are those who look at the Guidestones and see something somewhat different. They look at these Guidestones and, okay, of course, as I said, much of what is listed in these Guidestones aren't reprehensible ideas. But they look at this and they see that perhaps this is just a Guidestone for civilization once a climactic apocalyptic event occurs. And there are those who believe that the reason that it was built in Georgia, the where that it was built, was that this would be the safest place in the event of traumatic, apocalyptic type events, global flooding, things of that nature, that it was built high on a hilltop, that this would be a safe place, and that these Guidestones would still be there, would still stand through a climatic event that would destroy most of the life on this planet, and that with these 8 different languages, one group of these languages would still sustain enough that they could take on the knowledge of these Guidestones and rebuild civilization, that they could have a template to work with, to redo and correct mistakes that we had made before, and go forward with a more balanced, harmonious planet in the aftermath of this apocalyptic event. Maybe this was something that was spurred out of the idea of a nuclear war or something of that nature. Keep in mind, this was erected in 1980, still very much at the peak of the Cold War. So there is some belief that perhaps this was just something created, a group of individuals who saw this as, okay, this is our legacy to leave in the event that something happens. And adding some fuel to this, so to speak, is a tablet that on the tablet that describes the astronomical features. Okay, there and describes who the author is, the pseudonym, the sponsors. It also discusses a time capsule. Now it says that this time capsule will be placed 6 feet below the spot on, and it doesn't give the date as to when this time capsule will be placed. It's not engraved in it, and it says to be opened on and gives no date there either. So it would appear that this time capsule perhaps has not been buried in the spot yet. So the question is, will it be buried, or has it been buried and it was just never given a date? but it never gave a date as to when it's to be opened. So this would lead many to believe that the Guidestones are incomplete because whatever events that they believe are to happen to usher in this climactic event hasn't happened yet. So the individuals responsible for these stones, it would seem, have not saw fit to bury this time capsule yet. That whatever conditions are necessary have not been met yet. So very intriguing and very mysterious. What exactly are these Georgia Guidestones? Is this really a conspiracy to destroy humanity as we know it, to take away personal freedoms of our reproduction, to genetically modify our species, and to only allow certain individuals the ability to reproduce, and that we have to keep strict limits on how many people are here? Is this a matter of creating this new world order that many talk about and are fearful of, that will destroy our freedoms and usher in the Antichrist? Or is this a group that sees that perhaps something is going to happen, or believe that something will happen, that will destroy most of humanity as we know it, and see that this is an opportunity to fix the mistakes that were made in the past? Personally, I have not been to these Guidestones, although I'd love to go visit them. I'd like to see them in person. Whoever did these, whoever created these, this person or persons responsible, obviously very intelligent individuals. They're smart enough to understand all of the language necessary. Given this was 1980, there was no such thing as Google Translate. Okay, um, they would have had to have knowledge of all these different languages. They would have had to have had an astronomical knowledge as well to understand how that these stones needed to be placed and exactly why it was important. And they would have had a deep philosophical background, and certainly with the idea of laws and civilization, humanity. And they would have had to have had some sort of idea scientifically as to why 500,000 or 500,000,000 would be the ideal number of people for this planet to maintain balance. I'm not sure what the science would be behind determining that 500,000,000 is the appropriate number, but these individuals thought so. I'm not sure what these stones are. I'm not sure that there is an entirely evil purpose to them. Perhaps, as I said, that this is something to prepare the next phase of humanity for when something climactic does happen. But to look at some of those Orwellian sort of suggestions, and it does strike a little bit of concern. So maybe there's something here. Maybe there is something a little more diabolical, so to speak. I'm unsure, but it's definitely worth checking out. And there's a number of sites out there, but there's some fan sites, so it's really difficult to really find good stuff. And I mean, there's a Wikipedia page, but once again, trying to find a scholarly work on it is very hard to come by. But check it out for yourself. There's even some other stuff that I didn't really have time to get into talking to about in terms of ownership and things of that nature. But you get an opportunity, check it out. It'd be well worth your time. Um, well, that is all that I have for you today. Before I sign off this week, a few things. If you haven't already, I've been working on putting up the finishing touches of the Web of Conspiracy website, webofconspiracy.wix.com/Web of Conspiracy. I'm still doing it, still working. It's a work in progress, so bear with me, but you can stream the show from there. If you have the Spreaker app, you can sign up, stream it from there, and follow the show on there. Also, if you haven't yet, like the show on Facebook, follow it on Twitter, as well as adding in one of your circles in Google Plus. I try to post stuff up in there from time to time as well. So once again, it was great to be back with you this week, and I'll be back with you next Friday with another exciting episode. Thanks for listening.